In a Vote 2020 election special, candidates for the office of Washington's Secretary of State meet in their only debate before the August primary. Incumbent Secretary Kim Wyman is challenged by Democrat Gail Tarleton, Progressive Gentry Lang, and Independent Ed Minger. A presentation of KSPS PBS, the League of Women Voters, and the Spokesman Review. Join us now for the Washington Secretary of State primary debate.
Welcome. The League of Women Voters of Washington Education Fund, along with our partners, including the Spokesman Review, co-sponsor KSPS PBS, and local leagues, are pleased to present to you the candidates for the office of Secretary of State. I am Lunell Hott, President of the League of Women Voters of Washington and the League's Education Fund. Ever since the founding of the League 100 years ago, a significant part of our mission has been to provide voter education. This program is an opportunity for the candidates to present their views and positions on the office they are running for so that you, the voter, can make the most informed decision when you mark your ballot. The League and the Spokesman Review are sponsoring debates and forums around the state. We have gathered questions from many locales with the help of our co-sponsors. You can find up-to-date information on our website, lwvwa.org. The League also sponsors an online voters pamphlet with candidate and issue information at vote411.org. We are working with TVW and our other media co-sponsors to extend the reach of these forums throughout the state. Additional viewing information is available at tvw.org. Most importantly, in order to vote, you must be registered to vote. You can do that online with the Secretary of State or at an elections office near you. Our vote411.org website has more information. And now, to get to the candidates, here is our moderator who will briefly explain the process.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Christy Goranson. KSPS is pleased to bring you this debate featuring the candidates running for the office of Washington Secretary of State. The Secretary of State is the state's Chief Elections Officer, Chief Corporations Officer, and Supervisor of the State Archives. There are 4 candidates who would like to take on these responsibilities. Let me introduce them to you. Gentry Lang is a small business owner, former candidate for King County Executive and voting activist. Ed Minger is a K-12 educator and stormwater specialist living in Puyallup. Gail Tarleton has served as state representative from the 36th Legislative District since 2013. Prior to that, she was a Seattle Port Commissioner. And Kim Wyman is the incumbent in the race. She has held the office of Secretary of State since 2013. Prior to that, she was Thurston County Auditor. Welcome to you all. For this debate, the candidates will answer questions from a panel of Spokane journalists. From Olympia, please welcome Laurel Demkovich, reporter for the Spokesman Review. And here in the studio with me, Doug Nedvornik, Program Director and News Director of Spokane Public Radio. Before we begin, I want to go over a few of the debate rules for our viewers. The panel will ask the same question to all of the candidates. Candidates will answer in the order they're listed on the ballot, rotating through the opportunity to answer first. Candidates will have 1 minute for answers. In lieu of rebuttals, each candidate will be allowed 1 opportunity to challenge the statement of another candidate. They'll have 30 seconds each to challenge and answer. If the candidate does not use the challenge, they will have an additional 30 seconds at the end of questioning. So let's begin. And Mr. Minger, you're going to be the first on the ballot, so you will answer the first question first. And this question comes from the League of Women Voters and asks, what aspect of the job of Secretary of State is least understood but has the most significant impact? And Mr. Minger, you can start.
Wonderful. I have to acknowledge up front a few things. My lack of elected experience, right? So I would say the logistical piece of and the nuances of really how it's done. And so I think that that's a fair thing for me to say. And I think it's also fair for me to let folks know that management, period, when a new manager comes in, if they're not coming in a learning position, if they're not acknowledging, hey, there's experts and department heads and people here that know what the heck to do and I should rely on them. If that's not a manager's attitude, usually they have a hard time earning the respect of the folks they work with. So I'll acknowledge that that's the least understood piece. But the key part is that our elections are too divisive, and we need to be able to chip away at rules and changes and implement those changes in a way that encourage and reward folks for being civil, for being kind, from learning from each other, and from then governing in that way.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. Mr. Lang, you're next.
I believe the least understood part of the Secretary of State position is the position itself. Most people, when you say you're running for Secretary of State, don't understand what the position is. It is the chief elections officer in the state, and that is the foremost function of it. It has multiple other functions, but it is a fairly limited role. It is not a legislative position. So when people ask you questions about legislation, it's not about that. It is about elections first and foremost, and corporate documentation and archives as well.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lang. Ms. Wyman, you're next. What aspect of the job is least understood but has the most significant impact?
The thing that I think in our office that's least understood would be the address confidentiality program. This is a program that is designed to protect the addresses for people who have been survivors of domestic violence or stalking. And it protects their address because their mail comes to our office. And then we actually send it to their physical address so they can use things like, public records requests are the reason that people have been able to find the perpetrators have been able to find their victims. And this way they have an address they can use publicly that won't disclose their actual physical address. And we also protect their marriage and voting records. So these are really positive things. We have over 4,000 participants statewide in the program, and half of those participants are minor children. So it's really vital. It's very small and very few people know about it, but it's vitally important to those people.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton.
The job of this office has changed, and that's one of the least understood parts about the Office of Secretary of State. The Chief Elections Officer in 2020 has a very different kind of visibility and responsibility to defend every vote and every voter. One of the key parts of the Office of Secretary of State is to work closely with the governor's office, with the legislatures, and with the 39 local auditors to address the different kinds of threats that our elections face today. And those include foreign and domestic threats. It is essential that the auditors have the ability to be trained and have opportunities to exercise different scenarios for having elections put at risk. And very importantly, we need to understand what the voter roll purging is that happens in this state. More than 1.4 million voters have been purged off the rolls since 2012, and 700,000 are in the category of other. What is buried in those purges?
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. So the next question comes from Laurel from the Spokesman Review. And Mr. Lang, you'll take this question first.
Hi, candidates. My first question for you is, how would the Office of the Secretary of State be different if this position were nonpartisan, and would you support such a change?
In theory, I support such a change, but I believe when you strip away partisan labels, a lot of times people are still partisan and running for those offices. So it doesn't necessarily remove partisanship from the office. It just removes information for the voter. So for me, I'm running as a progressive. I've not been a Democrat or a Republican candidate. I've not been a Democrat or Republican. I'm not part of the current establishment, and I think it is important to have neutrality in this position. So I do offer that, running outside of the system, but I don't believe taking off partisan labels necessarily will remove any sort of partisanship from the position itself.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lang. Ms. Wyman, you're next.
Yes, actually, that is one of the issues that I'd like to try to tackle in the next legislative session if I'm reelected, and that is to just remove the partisan label entirely. I don't think it will actually take partisanship out of the way people perceive the office. I think that Mr. Lang is absolutely correct that you can see that in many offices that are nonpartisan currently, that the people that run for them are backed by either the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or one of the minor parties. But with that said, I think that it lends itself to more credibility because it takes that off the table. I know many of the attacks that have been coming my way, both in the campaign and towards the office, have more to do with trying to tie me to Trump and trying to make it into something about my being Republican, about how I run the office, than anything. And it really has very little to do with the way we operate in the office. So I am all for removing that partisan label.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. Ms. Tarleton.
Protecting voting rights and protecting our elections against any kind of interference, defending voting rights and defending voting by mail is not partisan politics. It is American. Elections are the way we elect our officials to govern us. And I have had a long track record of getting bipartisan legislation regarding election security, protecting cyber security and elections infrastructure through the legislature in both the House and the Senate with strong bipartisan support by both parties. And it's not because I'm a Democrat or they're Republicans. It's because I am working to protect what is right for our state and for all voters. And so when we do hear our president attacking voting rights and voting by mail, it is undermining our people's and our voters' confidence in our method of elections. And I am hearing it around the state, virtually, of course. I am hearing it around the state. And that is why we have to fight back when our rights are under attack.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. Mr. Minger, you're next.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Laurel. Labels are ripping us apart. Labels are making it so that we judge somebody based on a little word next to their name, as opposed to what they do and what they've shown and what they've demonstrated. But the labels are also important for our own self-political identities. So I don't fully support, either having the labels or not having the labels. I think there's potential alternatives that are not as simple as yes or no, labels or no labels. So for instance, I reached out to a political science professor that gave us a 100-question questionnaire, and you got a positive number if you lean to the right and a negative number if you lean to the left. Why not replace D or R with a standardized questionnaire that says I'm a +7 and that person's a -7, but we still agree on things? So not that we should do this or move that way, but why are we stuck arguing about whether or not to have labels? Let's just acknowledge that labels are ripping us apart and work together to not be ripped apart by them anymore.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. And Doug has the next question, and Ms. Wyman, you will take this one first.
Well, since she raised the address confidentiality program, I'll go to that. One county auditor I talked with this week said that program has had funding and staff added over the last few years in order to be able to serve more participants. But with what is no doubt going to be a difficult budget situation in the next legislature, this person was worried that program could be targeted. How would you address potential budget cuts and advocate for that program?
Oh, it's going to be the top program that we protect, one of many in the office, but that one is top of mind. We're certainly seeing an impact by COVID-19 right now. We've seen less people register for the program because they come to our program through organizations like Safe Place, where you have someone in crisis that is trying to get away from an abusive partner and needs a safe place to stay with their family, and they get referred to our program as part of their safety plan. So we're going to continue to work to make sure that program is available, and we're doing as much outreach as possible and education of those community service providers so that they can get people into our program. And then, finally, it's really just balancing all of the needs and the responsibilities the office has, and making sure that we're providing the service levels we need for every one of the divisions. And like every government agency, we're going to have to make cuts, and we will move forward.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. Ms. Tarleton, you're next.
Thanks so much for this important question. We have a serious issue facing this state, and as the House Finance Chair right now, I know that my colleagues are going to be working really hard, as I have throughout this interim period, trying to identify how we save what is most important to protect the most vulnerable and what is most important to anticipate the future needs of this state. I believe that elections funding is the critical component of voter education and voter outreach, and it's not just on this program. And so in this last session, I was able to get through an elections funding piece of legislation that makes the state responsible for funding the state and federal elections and gives the resources back to the local auditors to invest in those local programs for voter education, outreach, and protecting of every voter. We should not be handing voter data over to anyone's investigations at the federal level. The Trump Voter Fraud Commission got a hold of our data.
All right, thank you. Mr. Minger.
Yeah, this is a really good question, and I'm pretty pleased with some parts of everybody's answers so far. I love hearing Kim talk about the inner workings and the nuances and how it comes together. I love hearing Gail talk about the work that has to happen in the legislative branch to continue with things like this. I love that Gail used the word vulnerable, because one thing that we've learned from this COVID crisis and that word is that we must emphasize the protection of our most vulnerable, period. And the fact that Kim is saying and Gail is saying, this is exactly what we're going to do with this program, and they're in the executive branch and the legislative branch, and they can get that done, and we can rest assured that we are all looking out for the most vulnerable. Fantastic. I love these answers. I love hearing about it. And I have little to add because I defer to the experience of the people I'm discussing this with.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. Mr. Lang.
Yeah, I think number one, Secretary of State is not a legislative position, so it can use the power of the bully pulpit to advocate for money for the office and for voting. That's what any person elected to this position should do. Voting is perhaps the government's most important function to get right. It is not something that should be looked at as an office to be cut as if it were a non-essential part of government. So first of all, I think you need to use the position as a bully pulpit position to make sure you're a loud voice, or at least a reasonable voice, if not loud, for the right things to do on voting. Second, as we are talking about the rights of folks to not be tracked down by perhaps abusive ex-partners and things of this nature, I would like to bring up something in this race, which is, as we've moved to vote by mail, we have largely
Mr. Lang, you're out of time, so we are going to stop you right there. We're going to move on to the next question, but if you you have a 30-second challenge you can use, or you can use 30 seconds at the end of all of the questioning as well, if you want to address that a little bit later. So this next question, sticking with elections and voting, voter turnout in Washington has been on the decline for several years. How do you encourage people to vote? How do you welcome everyone into the electorate? And we're going to start with Ms. Tarleton first.
Voter participation is the essential ingredient of our democracy, because when a voice is heard through their vote, we know that we have representative government. And my concern has been not just falling participation, it's who is falling. Where are the details in the data? And we know that disproportionately our communities of color are not participating in the vote and having their voice heard. And that is where we need to put our money where our mouth is. If we want to expand voting rights, if we want to expand voter participation, if we want civic engagement, we need to do the work of bringing those communities and voices into the discussions that we have about what we need to do in our state. And I have voter education and youth outreach as part of my elections funding legislation this past year. My colleagues will carry that forward. We are going to increase that rate of participation by those disproportionately disenfranchised.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. Mr. Minger, you're next.
Yeah, I think our lack of engagement has a lot to do with the lack of excitement. We feel like we're not necessarily heard by our elected officials. We feel like they'd rather, or they're sort of forced to play certain games that turn a lot of us off to the system. So when I see people, saying they're against, and this is just across the board statement, not against anybody. When I see folks say that they're very much against foreign interference in our election, and then at the end of a month, they invite, by the fundraising deadline, they invite domestic meddling in our elections with donations and whatnot. It makes me say, this doesn't quite make sense. So I think we all, again, together can look at solutions that increase engagement and excitement and trust, and then watch folks come back into the system, be happy and excited to participate. And I think that's a critical and often overlooked sentiment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Minger. Mr. Lang, you're next.
Yeah, I think for voter participation, what drives down voter participation is lack of choices at the ballot box. Right now in Washington State, the top two is going to drive down voter participation for to some degree because the top two is kind of eliminating third parties from the general during the primaries. So you're not going to have many choices come the fall. You're going to have two. What goes on with voter participation, in my belief, is that when you increase the choices and increase the viewpoints of the candidates running for office that reflect more of the electorate's viewpoints, then you get increased turnout. So no matter how much education you do about voting, I don't believe you necessarily increase turnout. I think you can also increase things through things like ranked choice voting or similar systems that give people further choice in the system.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. And Ms. Wyman.
Yeah, so I would push back a little probably on the declining participation rates. In the last few years, actually, we've set some records here in Washington State. 2018, for example, was the highest turnout primary midterm election that we've seen, I think, in the last 50 years, but I'm pulling that out of my, out of my head, so that might not be accurate. But what I do know is the presidential primary, we also set a record. In fact, we were tracking to be at the 60% percentile rate of participation and fell short of that because it happened right at the end of the primary itself. The voting period started to end right at the middle of the COVID outbreak here in Washington State. Right now, I think we're running third in the country in terms of presidential primary turnout. So turnout is really driven by what's on the ballot. I would agree with Mr. Lang that it has a lot to do with the candidates and the races on the ballot, and vote by mail elections and the laws that were passed in 2018 by the legislature, I think are really going to make our turnout be of the highest in this country.
All right, thank you all. So Laura will have this next question, and Mr. Minger, you'll take this one first.
I want to keep on the idea of ensuring everyone has is able to participate in voting. And I want to ask, is there any special steps that we should or we can take to assure that communities of color are able to participate in voting?
Wonderful. Yeah. I think logistically speaking, I'll defer to Kim and Gail on this. I think they're going to have really good specific things that we can do. And I'm going to circle back to the excitement piece. And I'm going to take a little bit of what Mr. Lang said, what Gentry said about why are we limited to two choices? Why are we feeling like sometimes we have to choose between the lesser of two evils? Why do we often have the biggest voter turnout when people are excited to vote against something? Why don't we have excitement for people to vote for something? And so specifically, if we had a top 3 to 5 general election, if we told candidates they can't purchase advertising, they have to rely on other means of education, they have to talk to each other, they have to speak with each other and agree with each other. If we gradually made those changes, I think folks everywhere, especially folks that have felt marginalized and left out, would say, no, there is somebody on this ballot for me. So I'm going to go vote for them, not vote against the other person.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. Mr. Lang, you're next.
Yes, I believe that one of the things that is being overlooked with our current system is how when you shut down the polling places, it disproportionately impacts communities such as the homeless, Native American communities, people of color. Vote by mail has been a great boon to people that have permanent addresses, but it does not necessarily increase turnout the same way across the board. So what I've proposed is on a geographic and population sense, on average, opening at least 10 polling sites, early polling centers across the state. Right now, the rules say we have to have 1 per county. We used to have something like 2,500 per county. So if you want to increase turnout for not only maybe low-income people and others, giving them more access for things like last-minute voting, if they perhaps lose their ballot or their ballot wasn't delivered, perhaps they move. These things can all be done with a hybrid system where you have basically polling sites, early polling centers. Early polling centers would also allow you to socially distance in a situation such as we are in with the pandemic.
Great, thank you. Ms. Wyman, you're next.
Yes, I think one of the keys to getting to communities of color and underserved population is really going and talking to them and finding out what is going to best meet their needs. We did that, for example, in partnership with our counties with the Native American communities in our state. We have 29 recognized tribes in Washington state, and we've had some great success stories. For example, the Yakima Nation has worked with the county auditor in Yakima to not only site a drop box near their community center, but allowing them to use the community center as a place to receive ballots. Our new Vote WA system has actually geocoding for addresses. Instead of having a street file with address ranges or specific numbers, we can actually drop a pin anywhere on tribal land and actually precinct that voter into where they actually live and get them a ballot. So each community has its own set of challenges, and I think it's really about partnering with them to find the best ways to address the challenges they have.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton, you're next.
Voter access does not automatically translate into participation, as was said earlier. All of the work of the legislature over the past 2 years, 2018, 2019, and in 2020, were to expand voter access to the maximum extent, eliminating the requirement for those on tribal lands to have specific addresses, making sure that the auditors were having sufficient funding to do preferred language materials so that voters with a preferred language could get access to information about how to vote. Same-day voter registration is about access, but not participation. I think what we really have to look at is why people fear voting. The voter suppression that is going on around the country matters. It is having an effect on people here. People have come from other countries and other states where voting was not for them, and they don't know that it is our way of life here in Washington state to make you able to vote. I want to expand access for those with disabilities, and that's going to take a new job in this office.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. So Doug has this next question, and Mr. Lang, you will take this question first.
All right, so we'll follow up on something that Representative Tarleton just mentioned, and that was same-day election. One of the major elections changes in the last few years now allows people to register to vote and then and then vote on election day, something that wasn't allowed here in Washington before. Do you support that? If so, why? If not, why not?
I don't have a problem with people registering to vote on election day. I would support it. One of the problems I would point out, though, is that the longer you wait to vote, the more your ballot has a chance of being delayed sufficiently that it doesn't count. And in 2016, almost 36,000 votes, 35,927 votes were rejected for various reasons. I bring this one up specifically because my vote had been rejected in the past when I voted in 2008. I got a letter that said my vote hadn't counted. I had voted 4 days ahead of the election. So the way that the postal system works is it's going to delay a certain amount of mail for a certain amount of time. And not all mail comes in on time. And so people are being legally disenfranchised. It's not huge numbers, but I mean, 36,000 votes were rejected for various reasons. So, yeah, take of it what you will at this point.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lang. Ms. Wyman, you're next.
Yes, same-day registration. This will be the first presidential election we've had this law in place, and the second general election that we've been able to use it. So we've really been focusing all of our efforts and planning on same-day registration. In fact, that's one of the features of the statewide voter registration database that we have now, is that real-time connectivity for the counties. They are able to now be able to track when someone is issued a ballot. And even if on election day we had someone who went from Seattle down to Clark County and tried to register and vote in multiple places, I have very high confidence level that only one ballot would be counted. And this is important because our job is to inspire confidence in the public that this wide expansion of accessibility has the security measures in place to balance that out. So we're excited that it's going to be a great election, and we're not going to have to turn anyone away because they weren't prepared.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. Ms. Tarleton, you're next.
Inspiring confidence in our elections really requires us to expose lies and provide facts to expose those lies. When anyone is attacking voting by mail, when Trump is attacking it, when other officials around this country are attacking it, we should expose it as a lie, because voting by mail is the most secure form of voting that we have in the country. On the other hand, we have voter suppression going on. We have ballot rejections happening. We need audits of why ballot rejection happens in certain rates in certain counties more disproportionately to the number of voters voting. We also need audits of VoteWA so that we know how VoteWA is performing or is not performing, as we have seen problems in the past. These are all of the reasons why people are not sure if their vote is going to be counted as it cast, and we need to protect every voter's right to vote.
Can I challenge that?
Yes, was that Mr. Lang?
Yes.
Yes, you have 30 seconds.
So in 2016, 35,927 votes were rejected in the state of Washington. These are people that tried to vote through the vote by mail system. If you listen to NPR recently, Fessler did a whole report on people who voted correctly and had their vote thrown out. So when you say this is the most secure in the nation, what reporting is showing, less recent reporting, shows that Washington, Oregon, and Colorado throw out the most votes in the nation. In Washington state, last time it was almost 36,000 for the presidential election. We're talking about a state that decided a governor's
And
race
Mr. Lang,
by 109
you are out of time.
votes.
I'm sorry, your 30 seconds are up. And Ms. Tarleton, you have 30 seconds to respond back if you like.
Thanks very much. I completely agree that ballot rejection is a critical issue, and that's why we called for audits. And actually, an audit is being conducted right now because the legislature said that is unacceptable to have that many ballots rejected. What we need to know is why they were. Was it the Postal Service? Was it the auditors processing? Was it VoteWA? We need to know why.
All right, thank you. And Mr. Minger, you have a chance to answer this question.
Yeah, I love this conversation still, because it kind of points out the nonpartisan possibilities of this office. We have somebody with experience managing the system as it is. We have a legislator saying we'll do anything we can to write laws to right any wrongs that we need to fix. We have a progressive, scary word, right? We have a progressive that says, shouldn't we count every vote? And we have people that can implement it and look at solutions. So we have people calling for audits without saying Kim's name. We have a nice person in Kim Wyman who's helping other states have the right to vote. Our progressive, for instance, to point something out on their website, Top of Gentry's website, it says we can't go in 6 months in a pandemic to all polling places in any state in the country and in 6 months rush a vote by mail system and have it be as secure as possible. And I think that's where Kim's work with other states has been awesome. And I think it's interesting that we have Trump saying it can't be trusted in his Trumpian way, but we also have a progressive here saying maybe it can't just be brought online in 6 months during a pandemic, and let's figure it all out together. So good question. Let's figure out where those 36,000 ballots went, and let's count them next time.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. So this next question is from the League of Women Voters. How do military personnel currently access the ballot, and what changes would you make to this process? And Ms. Wyman, we're going to start with you first.
Yes, currently our military and overseas voters, civilian voters, are mailed a ballot 45 days before Election Day. And those voters are our only voting bloc that have the opportunity to also download a ballot and return it electronically if they have the opportunity. This is an area that is a little controversial, and I know that the members of the League and I have had many conversations about this issue, because from a cybersecurity standpoint, this is a really dangerous process. We've removed that provision in law from for our actually they never had it, our civilian stateside voters, and for our military and overseas voters, as much as it pains me to say, we really need to remove it as well, because we can't guarantee that that ballot is not going to be altered in transit and that we're getting it in its full complete way, and we don't even know if it was received by us in some cases. So that's another piece I would like to work on with the legislature next year.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton, you're next.
The integrity and security of every ballot has to be the number one objective when you are putting a cybersecurity plan into place. And what we do know about we had 537,000 veterans in this state as of the 2019 census data. And we have thousands of troops deployed with their families, as well as civilians living overseas who are wanting to vote in this election and in every election. Finding the solutions to the way we will use technologies, use secure technologies, figure out ways to ensure we are not disenfranchising those who are serving our country. That's another area where this job has changed, and we need expertise in technology systems, networks, infrastructure, working with the Cybersecurity Command, working with the local auditors and the state to make sure that the capacities are available in every single part of the state, not just at the Secretary of State's office, that we have worked with the military commands to make sure that their people are being given the right to vote.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. Mr. Minger, you are next.
Similarly, this is one of those very specific process questions that, if I'm lucky enough to have a position in the Secretary of State's office, it is where you defer to folks with Gail Tarleton's resume in the legislative branch. Go to her website and look at her resume. Gail knows exactly what she's talking about on this, and she can help us find solutions. Kim Wyman's been working the nuts and bolts and figuring out how to make it better. And yes, every single service member everywhere should always have their vote counted 100% of the time, period. And until we get there, we're always going to have work to do. And that's the beauty of our imperfect union, that we get to make progressively better together. So with that, I got 20 seconds. Earlier, Gentry Lang wanted to bring up that if we have 10 polling sites, it allows folks who might be forced at home in a vote by mail situation by an abusive spouse to go to more polling sites. So I wanted to finish his point for him because he didn't get a chance, and I think it's a good point to make.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. And Mr. Lang, you are next.
Yeah, so I want to make the point that I am not saying we need to shut down our vote by mail system. I think what we need is a hybrid system. I think we need to expand access to the polling sites, not just for access to voting, but for access to the secret ballot. In terms of what we are talking about here, even back in the Civil War, they managed to set up polling sites during the Civil War. This is not necessarily new. We definitely need people that are already experienced in making it secure. But one of the things about a hybrid system is that you can look at how one system votes and compare it to the other. So when you have those late absentees coming in, you have something to compare it to in the data to see if any sort of funny business might have gone on with the absentee ballots. And when you shut down your poll sites completely, or the vast majority of them, you lose a lot of data for basically what would be kind of a checksum function. Is this working compatible with this?
All right, thank you all. Laurel, you have this next question, and Ms. Tarleton, you'll answer this one first.
Sticking with voting and ballot security, do you think that there are opportunities for voter fraud or ballot tampering in the state of Washington, specifically related to the security of our vote by mail system? If not, please explain, and if so, how would you address it?
Thank you for the question, Laurel. Voter fraud is rampant in other states, and only 5 states have vote by mail because election security and protecting the privacy of the vote in one's home is what we get by voting by mail. So when we are having attacks on vote by mail by our president, what he's really saying is you should not vote by mail, the most private and secret place you can vote, because it's going to be fraudulent. Well, let's expose that as a lie. It is not inherently fraudulent to vote in your home and be able to sign your ballot and have it sent in by the U.S. Postal Service to our local auditors. I think we have to stop using that language. In this state, it is not a risk. And if it is a problem, we will find it because we do audits.
All right, thank you. Mr. Minger, you're next.
Wonderful. I think this gets to the heart of how easy it is to blow things out of proportion in our political system, and that we sort of reward that at times in elections because of our election structures. It kind of forces folks, hey, I need more headlines, right? We have 37 people trying to become governor right now, and you get one choice, one preference on your primary ballot, and you have to research all of them to do a good job. So we have structures that force those 37 people to say outlandish things or to accuse folks of problems that aren't as rampant as they can be made to sound. And so that gets to the heart of like, we need overall election reforms that don't encourage people to take something and scare people with it, that don't encourage people to try to get a headline by saying something that's outlandish, and instead reward folks who say, you know what, we have a bit of a problem, we're going to work together to fix it, and I'm not going to use this problem or this challenge to bludgeon my opponents over the head. So again, we're seeing a lot of agreement on this. We're seeing that we shouldn't assume the worst in people, and we shouldn't assume that they're being fraudulent, but we should work if we see it.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. Mr. Lang, you're next.
I would be comfortable with a president bringing up real problems with our voting system. He is not bringing up real problems with the voting system. Problems with vote by mail and bringing up the problems with vote by mail and saying that we need to move back towards a hybrid system is not necessarily just saying let's throw vote by mail out entirely. But the most secure place to vote in secret is behind a ballot, behind a curtain in a poll site. That's one of the fundamental four aspects of the Australian ballot, which was the original model for the secret ballot and what became the secret ballot. So behind a curtain where nobody else can look at your ballot is the most secure place and the only place you can guarantee a secret ballot. What a vote by mail ballot is, when you can sign it, is something that you can sell. It's something you can give away. It is something that somebody else can sign. These are the fundamental flaws in an entirely vote by mail system. You have seen this. You have seen this go on in North Carolina. You had
Mr. Lang, you're out of time. I'm sorry. We're going to have to cut you off there, and we're going to give Ms. Wyman her chance to answer this question. Thank you.
In terms of voter fraud, one of the things that's really an advantage in Washington State is that we have been really working towards this for 20 years, and we've been able to build in the compensating controls like checking every signature to ensure that the people that are casting the ballots are the ones that was issued to. We were part of a comparison after the 2018 election where we looked at voting history among states, and we did find in Washington State there were 142 cases of people who cast more than one ballot or cast a ballot on behalf of a deceased family member. Those are being investigated right now and turned over to prosecuting attorneys, and if they're not prosecuted at the county level, we're going to work with the FBI to prosecute those cases because it was a federal election. But the really important point here is that was 142 cases out of 3.2 million ballots cast in that election. So it's not perfect, but it is not rampant fraud by any stretch. And that's the type of thing that I talk about when I talk to people in other states and the national media about voter fraud in vote by mail elections.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wyman. Doug has this next question, and Mr. Minger, you're going to answer this one first.
Right on. All right, in terms of security, another security question. In this era of physical distancing, an Idaho Initiative campaign recently received permission to gather signatures online. The state is challenging that, state of Idaho. Should online signature gathering be adopted or allowed for initiatives in Washington?
I think that's a really wonderful question. I like the way that you phrased it, because we could go extreme and say we should vote online or something along those lines. And I would never go that far, right? But to say that we could gather signatures online in a way that is secure and possible and feasible in a state with like the greatest tech leading companies in the world, right? Like we can figure out the technology if we work together and decide we want to. And I don't think this isn't a primary big headline issue for me, because I think it's just a matter of if we set our minds to something, we can make it happen. And so I don't know what's going to shake out in Idaho, but I wouldn't be immediately for it or against it. And I reserve the right to change my mind based on new information. So we'll see.
All right, thank you, Mr. Minger. And Mr. Lang, yeah, you're next.
I'm fine with online signature gathering. It is not the essential function of counting the votes. It would be a good place to perhaps work out a lot of the security issues that might be involved without it having touched critical infrastructure.
Ms. Wyman, you're next.
Yes, our initiative and referendum process in Washington State has been around for over 100 years, and it sets up a pretty difficult bar for citizens to do direct democracy. And I think that in terms of an online signature gathering process, that needs to be a robust policy discussion with the legislature, because there are a lot of things to consider. For example, the minimum number of signatures that you have to gather, there's a reason it's difficult, and the reason it's high is to make sure that this is something that's really wanted by the people. We have a lot of initiatives that are filed, few that qualify for the ballot, and even fewer that are actually passed into law. And I think we have to be really careful and thoughtful how we move forward. But certainly, COVID-19 is shining a light on this, and we're really having to think about it. We just had a referendum petition that actually gathered almost twice as many signatures as it needed at the height of COVID. So I think we really just need to have that policy discussion before we make any big changes to our system.
Thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton, you're next.
This is a key issue, and it's another area where we should have been working on it 4 years ago, 8 years ago. I finally got legislation through and signed into law this year where, regarding election security breaches and potential risks to all the technologies associated with our elections infrastructure, that first, all of the equipment, any kind of systems, any kind of software, all of the networks have to be tested at a national or state test facility to ensure that they are not vulnerable and that they are adhering to performance standards as specified when a contract was let for procuring the technologies. I think we need a whole new look at what kinds of future technologies are going to be needed to innovate different parts of our election system. And this is where the job has to move towards people who know how to lead those kinds of infrastructure investments. I have been working in this area for 30 years, and it is essential that we anticipate access to the vote and to the ballot might mean moving towards technologies that are proven secure.
All right, thank you very much. So we have a time for a couple more questions. So this is one more question from the League of Women Voters, and it's non-election related. Secretary of State is responsible for corporation business registration. Does the registration process need to change? And if so, how? And Mr. Lang, we would like you to start this first.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of updating that can go on throughout the system. The ease of using some of the online systems is perhaps a little lacking. Everywhere from, I think, the most starved for money program of the PDC, if you try to use their systems, they might be back in 1997. It's not under the purview of the Secretary of State, but it's something that the Secretary of State could be used to advocate for. Updating our systems for ease of access for small businesses that don't have a lot of employees, that can fill out forms and understand the kind of archaic, can I right click here in this form? Does it pop up a box? These things, I think, from a user interface level, really need to be reassessed in the 2020s and beyond.
All right, thank you, Mr. Lang. Ms. Wyman.
Yes, well, I'm proud to tell you that one of the things that we have as a major accomplishment in my office is that we brought up a new corporations and charities filing system that has reduced the amount of time it takes for a corporation to file or a nonprofit entity to file from what used to be, in some cases, weeks to a matter of hours or days. And that's been really beneficial for our business partners. And it is also, in terms of efficiency, has allowed us to be more efficient in our processing. So we've been able to reduce our filing fees. That has saved businesses and charities across the state $11 million every 2 years in just filing fees. And so we're really proud of that. And just trying to make it as efficient for customers is really the key, because the whole point of our corporation and charities filing is to allow for public access for people to find out information about corporations or charities that they want to do business with, and get information that's easily accessible.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton, you can answer next.
It's essential coming through this pandemic and whatever comes next, and I'm not going to call it recovery, having businesses and nonprofits be able to continue to rebuild their capacity, have access to every single community, is an essential part of this job. And the Secretary of State's office should be working much more closely with the Department of Commerce, with the Department of Transportation, with the legislature to ensure that we are taking full advantage of all of the investments that need to happen in our communities. And one of the things that the legislature did this year with the support of the Secretary of State, with the governor, and with the business community is we changed the law so that that enterprises do not have to get new registration for every new company that they open, so they can franchise up to 6 new franchises like a coffee shop around the state without paying a new filing fee. That is an important reform, and we should build on it.
All right, thank you, Ms. Tarleton. And Mr. Minger, you can answer this.
Yeah, I'll jump back a little bit to kind of how Kim ended when she said sort of the purpose behind filing and having all this information in one place. The purpose is so you can go look at where you want to spend money or what companies you want to support, or you can find as much information as is available. And I think we should take something that Gentry is proposing, which is bringing back the Economic Productivity Board, but let's call it ERIC, the Economic Recovery and Innovation Committee, because the word board is really scary, so let's make it a committee. And one thing they would work on is something I'm calling Washapedia, where when you get a business license, you also get access to a simple web page where if you can get a merit badge from a third party about environmental stewardship or diverse hiring practices or consistent wage increases for your workers, that's right there on Washapedia. And I think the Secretary of State's office, through a committee that Gentry's proposing that I'm a fan of, could work, as Gail is describing, with legislators, with governors, with businesses throughout our state to let people vote with their dollars. So that's an exciting next thing that I would like to see happen.
All right, thank you all. And this is going to be our final question, and Doug is going to take this one, and Ms. Wyman, you will answer this one first.
So the Secretary of State is the chief elections official in the state, but a lot of the work in elections is done by the county auditor's offices all around. Can you tell us about how you would build working relationships with county auditors?
Absolutely. This is something that we really started 8 years ago when I first came into this office, is having a real partnership approach to working with the counties. And one of the things I'm most proud of is the partnership that 40 independently elected officials worked on a project over about a 1.5 year period of time to bring up an interconnected statewide voter registration and election management system called VoteWa. And that system has successfully been able to process over 16 million ballots that were issued over 5 elections, to process 6.2 million ballots coming back in. Over 7,000 candidates used it to file during candidate filing week. And while it's had some bumps, the system is working really well, and we're prepared for the upcoming election. These are the kind of partnerships that I want to continue having with our county officials, and want to continue to make sure that our elections remain secure and accessible and really a model for the rest of the country.
All right, thank you, Ms. Wyman. And Ms. Tarleton, you can answer this one next.
I'd like to challenge Secretary Wyman's statement about VoteWa and then go to my statement.
No problem. That's fine. You have 30 seconds for the challenge.
You know, VoteWa was a system that was deployed to the 39 counties and is headquartered at the Secretary of State's office. A lot of people don't know about it. It has been plagued with failures and outages since being deployed because it was not tested properly. Many of the auditors were really opposed to the deployment of VoteWa, the way that it was done. It was not done in collaboration with the Secretary of State's office. The decision was much more of a mandate as opposed to a collaborative decision. And that has to change, and that is why we need an audit of VoteWa.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Wyman, you have 30 seconds to respond.
First of all, I'd welcome an audit of VoteWa. It stands on its own. Has it had some technical glitches? Absolutely. Any new technology does. I brought up over 10 different systems over my career, worked with many partners. This one was a partnership. The 39 counties were involved, and the reason that we went live is because the legislature set a date of 2019 to implement same-day registration, automatic registration, and future voter program. We needed to have a system that could actually support that legislation. We got it in place, it's up and running, and it's been a success.
All right, thank you. And Ms. Tarleton, you have a chance to, we have 60 seconds to answer Doug's question.
And Doug's question, if I recall, how do we work more closely and effectively with the auditors around the state? Correct. That is an essential reminder. They run the elections on the ground. We need to have their back all the time. When they are dealing with this pandemic, we have to help them get expanded facilities. We need them to have protective equipment if their elections workers need to be physically distanced and wearing protective equipment to do the ballot processing. We need to help them have the equipment and the cameras and the web streaming so that elections observers can observe on the ground virtually and not in person this year. We need to be working with them to get them trained and in partnerships with our community and technical colleges around the state so that they can get certifications and professional development training with working through emergencies like this or an earthquake or any other kind of an emergency. These auditors are our people on the front lines, and we need to help them conduct our elections safely and securely.
I'm going to take that word relationships and kind of focus on relationships. Before I do that, edminger.com currently is replaced with a Google document called "The Offer is on the Table." And if people go there, that'll just be there for the next hour and a half or so. And now let's talk about relationships. As a social studies teacher of junior high kids, I know the importance of relationships. I know that they take work, and I know they're probably going to take election systems and reforms that make it so people don't have to destroy relationships to get the job of an elected official, where people can be lifting each other up and pointing out the positives in other people and saying, I'm going to make mistakes and I'm going to screw up and I hope you have my back when I do. But we don't reward that sort of behavior in our election system, and it's going to take some reforms. That said, the offer is on the table. We have a candidate in this race who's been endorsed by many folks throughout the state who manage these systems. Her name is Kim Wyman. She has earned that trust and that support and that respect because she probably empowers folks. She's accountable to them, and she's flexible if things need to change. That would be my guess based on what I've seen.
Thank you, Mr. Minger. And Mr. Lang, you can answer this question next.
So my history is working largely in the state against county auditors so far. Back in 2004, a lot of us worked against the movement towards systems like Diebold election systems, ES&S premier systems, and whatnot. And I ran a campaign for Andy Stevenson, who ran as a Democrat for Secretary of State. And there was a documentary made about this movement. It was called Hacking Democracy, and it was on HBO many times. When I've encountered the county auditors, largely these people have signed away our rights to own our own vote counting machines, vote counting software, I should say. And so largely my goal is to inspire people to run for county auditor that want to institute things like publicly owned open source software. So if you'd like to run for county auditor, that's what I would encourage. As far as working with the county auditors, if you elect me, my goal will be to push forward a vision of publicly owned open source software so we can get away from these relationships like the one that went on with VoteWA. And I don't need to beat up on VoteWA too much. But,
all right, thank you. You are out of time. And that will have to be the last question. We have time now for closing statements, and candidates with unused challenges will have 30 seconds for a final comment. And Mr. Minger, you can go first.
Wonderful, thank you. I thank everybody for being here and this forum and flexibility and figuring out Zoom and technology as we run for an office where we're all talking about figuring out new technology. Pretty cool. We're all in that moment together. One thing I didn't get to point out is the idea of something called approval voting. And approval voting, if you have 3 to 5 candidates in a general election, you would get to check all that you approve of, which would encourage centrists to step out and say, I can kind of appeal to and listen to multiple groups of folks and make sure they're heard. And so I'm for approval voting. It's not an anti-Democrat Republican issue. It's just something to make sure people feel heard.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Minger. And Ms. Wyman, 30 seconds.
Yes, I'd like to end this forum with the note of the most important part of this job is trustworthiness. And through my experience and performance through the last 27 years conducting elections and doing the job, I've earned the support of Democrats, Republicans, and independents across the state. 50 election officials who have actually done the work and know what needs to be done have chosen to support and endorse my race. And I think that is the thing that I want people to know most.
Well, that will do it for this debate, our forum. Thanks to each of the candidates as well as to our journalists Laurel Demkovich and Doug Nedvornik, and to the League of Women Voters for their assistance in organizing this debate. A quick reminder, the primary election is August 4th. Be looking for those ballots in your mailbox and make sure they are postmarked by that date. From all of us at KSPS, thank you for watching.
Thank you for informing yourself about the candidates. The League is proud to be nonpartisan, neither supporting nor opposing candidates or political parties at any level of government, always working on vital issues of concern to members and the public. Our main goal is to make democracy work. The State League sponsors the statewide candidate forums and debates, and our 20 local leagues, made up of 2,400 members, produce local election forums. This is the centennial year for both the League and the 19th Amendment, which recognized women's right to vote. It took more years for all women and men to actually secure the vote. Although our name contains the word women, the League is open to all men and women 16 and older, and our purpose is to make sure voters understand issues and candidates. The League has two organizations: the education arm that presents candidate forums and debates across the state. It is our impartiality and our history as a trusted organization that gives us this privilege. The education arm, through the League's Vote 411 website, provides candidate information. It is different from the guide you receive from the Secretary of State's office because it is the only resource that covers every race in Washington. The League doesn't tell you how to vote, but it ensures you have enough information to be confident about your vote. The other is the advocacy arm that promotes public policy in Olympia through about a dozen volunteer lobbyists. We are grateful to our partner, the Spokesman Review, and our local co-sponsors who have joined us in soliciting questions from voters for these programs. You can get a copy of your vote at lwv.org. It has detailed information about elections, descriptions of elected official offices, what to listen for in a debate or forum, and elections that have been won or lost over a single vote.